The audio has always been the thing that's really helped prescribe Killer Instinct as a unique fighting game vehicle since its inception. And it's something that we were very adamant to maintain when we were bringing back Killer Instinct this time around.
Killer Instinct.
First thing was the announcer. How are we going to land the announcer and get the tone correct for what we wanted to do in the reboot?
The announcers always played a huge role in the KI franchise. Walking into an arcade, you would hear that thing screaming at you from the back of the room.
Ultra combo, right? Combo breaker! And you're like, what is that? I've got to go check that out. How can we not bring back the original announcer? We approached Rare and said, hey, could we use Chris again in order to update the lines? And of course, as we added new characters that didn't exist in the original games, we needed Chris to cover those. I think that also like Robin Beanland and the crew over at Rare did an amazing job on the music for the original game.
Sega Arcade. Ready.
Looking back at Killer Cuts, we're like, well, we have to do this justice. We have to continue this legacy of amazing music. And they vetted a ton of different musicians before landing on Mick Gordon.
Back in 2012, Jed from Double Helix contacted me and he said, we have a really, really cool fighting game that we would like you talk to you about doing the music for. And I was like, yeah, cool, fighting games, I've never done one before. He sent me an email straight after that and he said, we're making the new Killer Instinct. And my head just exploded. I mean, I spent so much time when I was younger playing Killer Instinct. Get an opportunity to work on the new Killer Instinct was just incredible.
Mick delivered that first remake of the Jago theme, and that's really when we kind of said, oh my gosh, we've got something here, we're going to run with this guy.
Jago was a really, really fun experience because he was the first character that we worked with. We went with the whole Tibetan thing, so I went to visit a Buddhist temple and tried to learn how to do throat singing. And it's like you're clearing your throat, you get that and at that last little bit where your throat starts to go a bit furry, you kind of hold that. Then from there, you just change the shape of your mouth and you get the different vocal techniques. The best themes are when you completely engross yourself in a character. You try and understand that character. You try and get behind the character's mind. What would happen if we put Saberwolf in the middle of an orchestra? How would that sound? You know, we've got the music for Saberwolf and they're trying to play. But what happens when he's trying to tear them apart? He's ripping the cellos apart, he's busting their brass instruments and all that sort of thing. How would that sound?
Anytime we approach a character, we don't want to fall back on just voiceover. We don't want to just fall back on just their music. We need to establish their character and their personality just top to bottom, and that includes the sound design.
Think you got what it takes to beat the champ?
TJ Combo was an interesting character to start the season off with. He's this big, brash boxer that's formerly had cybernetics implanted into his arms, and he's ripped them out to become champion again on his own terms. One of the ideas that I always had was that he was always sort of reliving his past. So anytime he gets knocked down, you hear a bell.
We actually purchased a boxing bell that I recorded at the studio in Chicago.
And then I rolled in a bunch of dreamlike sort of crowd cheers that would kind of go from fronts and then do a full surroundscape around the player, because I always wanted that idea of anytime he gets knocked down, he needs to push himself to get up again.
You make a fine specimen.
Han-Ra was the first original character for Season 2. He is essentially like this mummified lich that has control over dark magic. I remember bringing Jeff Domkowski in for some of the Scarab work and was just kind of like, what do you got? What sort of ideas do you have for that?
Well, I came onto the project where that character was pretty much on his way out the door. There were a couple of other sounds that had to be recorded, one of which was the sound of his scarabs. I wanted to try to get just that sound of just like a million kind of bugs coming at you, ticky, ticky, ticky on the ground. I ended up settling on ping pong balls that we chopped in half, stuck in a bit of a burlap bag, and then just bounced against the concrete surface a whole bunch.
In addition to that, we put a file cabinet on a subwoofer, and we were running pulses through it. And then I would route those through these Doppler effects that would kind of have it sound like it's kind of passing by really, really quickly. So anytime you see the move of Conra like hitting you with his raps and swinging the character around the screen, you'll just hear that file cabinet kind of going.
Riptor was an interesting challenge. We had to balance some of her more cybernetic parts with her actual like dinosaur skin and flesh and claws and things to that effect. For her claws, it was pretty much gardening tools that we scraped against concrete, which we then manipulated through a lot of pitch control and kind of give it more of a sci-fi, laser element to it. For her tail, we used a lot of whip recordings, coupled with just some synthesis elements that we pitch shifted up and down and did a lot of phase manipulation on to give it that doubled, flanged, science fiction sort of sound.
I was the vocal designer for Riptor, so that voice is primarily me in a plunger. Hisako's a creepy ghost girl that sort of follows the horror movie trope.
Hisako was fun because we kind of got to go old school with it. We were going for that, just that horror movie kind of vibe, when you have like an undead character moving around. So we got to do a lot of the old Foley methods of breaking a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits and things. When she's walking in particular, we really wanted that sound of kind of everything inside her, like all her bone and sinew and everything, kind of settling with every footstep, so it kind of sounded like she wasn't held together as much as a regular human being would be. So we came up with the idea of taking taco shells and gluing those into kind of groups of about 4 or 5 or so, and then slowly just kind of breaking them and, bending them back and forth.
We did some cool teleport sounds for her, where we did a bunch of cloth kind of snap and bursts, and then I took a bunch of small blades to kind of give that idea of her like slicing through the air as she teleports in. She was really, really creepy, and it was a lot of fun to work on Hisako. Cinder was always my favorite in the original Killer Instinct, so he held a pretty close place in my heart. We put together this big recording session where we brought out all of this kind of fuel types, all of these different hand props that we put together, and we just started lighting stuff on fire. We had this big contraption where we went up on a ladder and we were swinging things back and forth. We took several water bottles and filled it with fuel and tossed it into the fire pit. And as the fire would melt through the plastic, it would hit that fuel and shoot it out and explode at the same time. So you'd get almost like this artillery shell that would pop. And that's actually a huge basis of Cinder's pyro bombs. It's been astonishing to see the amount of passion that people have for this 20-year-old franchise.
The way that fans have accepted us into their lives and trusted us with Killer Instinct has been really, really humbling.
It's still reminiscent of the old game. I think that's something that we try to actively do to try to just keep that feeling there, keep it sounding as cool as we can, but it still has to have that Killer Instinct flavor to it.
There will always be rocking music. There will always be incredible announcers. There will always be characters that have interesting audio lines and more detail. It's art on the screen, but audio is what brings them to life. And so that will always be a major part of Killer Instinct.
All of us love this game so much, and we play it at home. I play it all the time. Terrible at it, but I play it. It's really, really great to be able to feel like you're part of something like that.